How does something that's random make something that looks intentional?
Hey, I'm John, and I went on a road trip to find answers to some of life's biggest questions. Join me on the road trip to truth.
Truth, it doesn't exist, in my opinion.
Doesn't matter what somebody else thinks.
No certainty. Everything is subjective.
Odds are you've spent enough time online to see your fair share of really bad arguments. And if you've seen your fair share of really bad arguments, you've probably run across the term logical fallacy. To put it simply, a logical fallacy is just a fancy term to describe a flawed line of reasoning. These flaws weaken an argument and cause it to become manipulative or shallow or severely opinionated. Well, that maybe doesn't sound like such a big deal. If a logical fallacy slips by you, you could end up believing something that is not true. The bigger the claim being made, the more important it is to spot a fallacy. Your whole life could change because you buy into some bad logic. This is seen most starkly in the arguments about the origins of the universe, arguments between creationism and evolution.
How do you think the universe came into existence?
God.
How do we get here?
Chance.
I'm more of a creationist myself.
Life started from like single-cell organisms.
Bacteria, plants, animals, and then from that, us.
I believe that God created everyone.
Nobody really knows. It's a very difficult topic.
To help me get an understanding of logical fallacies in the area of origins, I met up with Dr. Jason Lyles, an astrophysicist and an expert in logic. Dr. Lyles, you are officially an expert because you have a book and it has your name on it. What was this book all about?
Logical fallacies, errors in reasoning. And I found that a lot of the arguments that go back and forth on the topic of origins, they're not always logical. People make mistakes in reasoning. And I found that one of the most important aspects of being able to reason with people is spotting errors in their reasoning. I found that pretty much every argument that people use to defend evolution, which is then used to dismiss the Bible, is based on a logical fallacy. It's based on an error in reasoning. I'm trying to show people that the Christian worldview is true. I'm concerned for their eternal soul is what it comes down to. There are people that have been persuaded by bad arguments that Christianity is false. And as a result, they've said, well, I'm not going to place my faith in Jesus. I don't even believe in God. And they're going to find out that they're going to have to spend an eternity in hell, and that is the most horrible consequence imaginable. So it's very important that we learn how to reason rationally, that we learn to think rightly. It can literally be the difference between eternal life and eternal death.
What are some of the logical fallacies that lead someone to make those eternal consequence decisions that end in bad things? What are some logical fallacies they use?
One of the most common is the fallacy of equivocation, where you change the meaning of a word in the middle of an argument. The word evolution can just mean change in a generic sense, and well, we all agree things change. The Bible indicates that. The world was a paradise, today it's not. Things have changed. But I don't believe that microbes like bacteria eventually become people. So I don't believe in evolution in the Darwinian sense of the word. And you'd be surprised how many people, in order to prove what they think they're proving Darwinian evolution, and then they'll give an example of a change that's actually consistent with creation. And that's an equivocation fallacy on the word evolution. Very common error. But there are other things as well. Equivocation on the word theory, in the scientific sense, means something that's really pretty well established, something that for which there's supporting evidence. On the other hand, in the vernacular, theory can just mean something that's unproved. I've got this theory about which team's going to win or whatever. And so people sometimes will interchange those to prove a point. For example, you might talk about germ theory. Now that falls under category A. That's something that's well established by science. We have good supporting evidence. And so people will say, well, sure, evolution's just a theory, but so is germ theory, and you believe that, don't you? Well, so you should believe evolution. And they're equivocating on that term because they're confusing something which is well established with something that really is theory only in the sense of a conjecture.
What are some other logical fallacies?
There's the fallacy of reification. Now, reification is interesting because it's not necessarily a fallacy. Reification is when you attribute a personal or sometimes a concrete characteristic to an abstraction. And so you say it's not nice to fool Mother Nature, or Dr. Lyles was on vacation, but his job was calling him back to the office. You can't literally do that. We understand that. Right. And when reification is used in a poetic sense, it's fine, it's beautiful. The Bible sometimes uses reification when it says that wisdom calls or wisdom wisdom scoffs and things like that. Well, you can't literally do that. We understand that. It's a personification of sorts. But when you use it in an argument, when you use it to try and persuade somebody, you're mixing categories a little bit, because you're now trying to give something a property that it can't literally possess. And this comes up in the origins debate when creationists maybe will ask, well, how do you account for the design that we see in living organisms? And evolutionists sometimes will say, well, nature found a way, or nature has designed this organism.
How does something that's random make something that looks intentional?
The random stuff that make you like not die would be classified as the best.
Who decides that?
Well, I don't know, just nature does.
Now, nature can't do that because nature doesn't have a mind.
Yeah, or evolution has changed these
Yeah, there you go.
properties, right?
Yeah, and so they're referring to an abstract thing, but they're giving it a personal, concrete characteristic in order to solve a problem, and that's not possible. That's not logical. It's an error in reasoning. It's a very common one.
Yeah, I found people do that with time too. It's
Yes.
like time changes things.
You're right. That's a great example. Time is the hero of the plot. There was actually an evolutionist who put it that way. Given enough time, anything is possible. That doesn't circumvent the fact that design really does require a designer. Complex question is an example of a fallacy, and this is where you ask a question, but you ask it in a biased way that assumes something that isn't necessarily true.
Sure.
The textbook example is, have you stopped beating your wife?
Right.
And no matter how you answer that, it sounds like, well, yeah, I used to beat my, it assumes that you used to beat your wife, and that's not necessary. Hopefully that's not true.
No, it's not true.
And an example of that when it comes to creation and evolution, sometimes people say, well, why are you creationists against science? And well, we're not against science, right? And they call that a complex question because it should be divided into two. The first question should be, are you against science? And then if so, why?
Right.
And since the answer to the first is, well, we're not, then the second one becomes irrelevant. Fallacy of complex question, it occurs all the time in origins debates.
You might be thinking, hold up, Christianity as a reasonable faith? As a logical system of thought? You're probably used to hearing that Christianity is just a collection of legends. Nothing more than a glorified fairy tale, maybe just a crutch for the feeble-minded. Well, stick around as we explore more logical fallacies to find out how logical the Christian faith really is. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Next week, we got more content coming at you, so make sure you subscribe.